They called her the Red Woman, a priestess, a mystic, a vessel of flame. But what they didn't know, what no one ever asked, was which god she truly served. Melisandre arrived in Westeros under the banner of Rahlor, the Lord of Light. To the Edas, lords of men, she was a prophet, to the broken a healer, and to Stannis Baratheon she was a weapon, his guiding flame in the darkness of war. But Stannis was never her chosen king. He was only the first sacrifice. The flames whispered more than prophecies. They revealed a map, a network of ley lines pulsing beneath Westeros, lines of ancient, forgotten magic. Magic that could bend time, twist fate, even reshape life and death. Magic that had long been sealed away by the children of the forest and the first men. Magic that her god, the nameless flame, sought to unleash. For centuries, the Red Priests had fought amongst themselves. Some worshipped R'hllor, others whispered of the shadow, but Melisandre had walked deeper into the fire than any before her. In the fire she found something older than light, something that didn't want worship. It wanted the world to burn and be reborn in its image. She called it the One Beneath Flame, and she would be its herald. Stannis was just the beginning. Every moment she spent by his side, every whisper of Azor Ahai, every flickering vision in the flames, was part of a grand illusion. She manipulated his fears, encouraged blood sacrifices. She watched his army dwindle, watched him grow more desperate. And when he burned his only daughter Shireen on her advice, the spell was complete. It wasn't for R'hllor. It was for her god, whose essence lay chained beneath the smoking ruins of Valyria. That fire, born of innocent blood and a king's desperation, unlocked the first seal. A wave of power surged across the north, unseen by mortal eyes, but felt in every cold breath of wind. Something ancient had stirred, and Melisandre. She smiled. When Stannis fell, she did not weep. She simply walked away, guided by the flames to her next pawn, Jon Snow Castle Black, the Wall, a place built to keep death out. But now it was a gate. Jon Snow was no ordinary man, born of ice and fire, a child of prophecy. But prophecy is a blade with no hilt. It cuts anyone who dares hold it. When Jon was stabbed by his brothers, Melisandre didn't hesitate. She performed the resurrection, not out of devotion or love, but because she needed him. But the truth, she didn't bring all of him back. In the ritual, part of his soul was consumed by the flames. The light in his eyes dimmed. His laughter faded. He returned colder, quieter, haunted. He thought it was trauma, but it was the void left behind, the missing piece now inside her god. Now the real game began, with Jon rising in the north and Daenerys inching ever closer from the east. Melisandre positioned herself in the shadows, guiding prophecy with a puppet master's touch. She whispered through Lord Varys's spies. She manipulated Tyrion's dreams. She even visited Bran in visions, planting false signs and distorting the timelines he glimpsed. The three-eyed raven was powerful, but even the weirwood roots were burning slowly from within. And all the while, Melisandre kept watch on Winterfell. Apti 4. Battle of the Bastards was more than vengeance. It was a bloodletting. Every soldier who fell spilled more fuel onto her invisible altar. And when Jon took back Winterfell, Melisandre was already preparing the second seal. One more sacrifice. She visited Davos in the snow, letting him discover the truth about Shireen's death. She knew it would lead to her exile, but that was her. Planned exile would force her south. Closer to the third seal, Daenerys Targaryen. Exiled from the north, Melisandre wandered through the riverlands, but she didn't mourn, she didn't beg, because now she was free. Her face changed in the firelight, older, truer. No longer bound by the mask of obedience or loyalty, she walked like a ghost through the ruins of the war-torn land, a priestess with no temple, and yet more powerful than ever. She followed the pull in her chest, a thread of flame tugging her. South, toward Meereen, toward Daenerys. Daenerys. Stormborn had always been a name the flames danced around, a breaker of chains, a mother of dragons. She was a living myth, but also, like Jon, a child of ice and fire. Her connection to magic was raw, unstable, perfect. When Melisandre finally arrived at Dragonstone, she didn't ask permission. She stood in the throne room, barefoot and unblinking. Tyrion watched her with suspicion. Varys trembled. But Daenerys listened. Melisandre spoke of the Great War, of the Long Night, of the coming darkness. She claimed she had made mistakes, claimed she saw clearly now, claimed that Jon Snow and Daenerys together were the key, and Dany, still bleeding from the losses in Essos, still aching for a vision of purpose, believed her. In truth, Melisandre never needed both of them. She only needed one vessel, and Daenerys was the stronger flame. At night, Melisandre stood at the edge of Dragonstone's cliffs, whispering into the winds. She didn't pray to R'hllor anymore. She commanded. Each day, Daenerys grew more intense, her vision sharper, her patience thinner. She began dreaming of red skies, ash falling like snow, a voice in her mind whispering, "Only fire can cleanse the world." Jon's arrival sparked a fragile alliance, but Melisandre made sure they were always slightly out of sync. Never quite in balance, each feeling love and yet doubt. She called it fate, but she was bending fate with her own two hands. Then came the journey north. The White Hunt, the trap. Melisandre saw it all in the flames and let it happen. She needed Jon to die again, or nearly die, and he did. Drowned in ice, pulled from death one more time, but this time there was no ritual, no priestess nearby. And yet, Jon still came back. Because the flame already lived inside him, the corruption seeded in Castle Black now glowing faintly beneath his skin. At Winterfell, while the others planned for the Night King, Melisandre prepared her third and most terrible act. The battle of Winterfell was never meant to be won by men. It was meant to feed the god. Thousands died. Brave men and women fell in darkness. Lyanna Mormont, Theon, Jorah, Beric. And when Arya leapt at the Night King, blade in hand, Melisandre was already walking through the snow outside, eyes glowing faintly red. The Night King shattered, but with his death, something far worse was freed. Because the Night King had been a gatekeeper, a frozen lock, and with him gone, the final seal cracked. The fire beneath Valyria stirred, and Melisandre whispered a single word: "Rise." No one knew. They celebrated. They drank and danced and wept in relief. Jon brooded in silence. Daenerys stood on the ramparts, alone, and Melisandre. She walked into the woods, robes fluttering in the wind. The north had no more use. Her god's gaze had turned elsewhere. In the ruins of Valyria, black stone began to bleed. Red clouds churned, and beneath it all, the nameless flame blinked for the first time in 1,000 years. Winterfell had stood for thousands of years. Stone carved by the hands of the first men, roots older than kings, but it had never faced an enemy like this. The north was quiet after the war, too quiet. The snow never melted. The sky held a strange red tint, as if dawn had frozen mid-scream. Ravens flew in circles, confused. Direwolves refused to howl. Something had shifted, something had cracked. Bran Stark, now the three-eyed raven, sat beneath the weirwood tree. His visions, once clear as flowing water, had turned into firestorms. The branches around him wept sap like blood. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Melisandre, walking through ancient ruins, lighting flames in places where no fire should burn, her face, older, cracked, glowing from within, no longer a servant of flame, now something flameborn. Bran called a council, Sansa, Arya, Jon, but they didn't understand. How could they? Jon was still wrestling with Daenerys. Sansa distrusted every shadow. Arya was restless, always watching the road behind her more than the one ahead. Bran tried to explain that the war wasn't over, that the true enemy hadn't been the Night King, but the one who had let him fall, and she was still alive. Sansa narrowed her eyes. "You mean the Red Woman? She vanished after the battle." Bran didn't blink. "She's not gone. She's become something else. and Winterfell is the next gate. That night the air turned to ash. A low hum began to vibrate through the stones of Winterfell. The crypts echoed with soft whispers, as if the dead were remembering something. The old gods turned their faces away, and in the eastern skies, over the shivering sea, a red star streaked across the heavens. Not a comet. A warning. Melisandre had returned, but she didn't walk through the gates. She appeared in dreams. To soldiers, to servants, to Bran, whispers of temptation, visions of burning glory, flashes of an eternal kingdom bathed in firelight, and one by one, people began to disappear. Bran's mind cracked open one night as he entered the weirwood. Network. The roots beneath Winterfell had once been sacred, pure connections to the past. Now they burned, literally. He saw Melisandre standing in the heart of Valyria, arms outstretched, fire pouring through her like veins of molten gold. She was no longer alone. Figures stood behind her, priests of ash, eyeless, chanting. The nameless flame had found form, and it was using her to rewrite history itself. Jon Snow tried to confront her. He rode south, alone, to the edge of the Stormlands, where firestorms had begun swallowing villages. He found her, or something that wore her skin. She stood barefoot in a circle of scorched earth. Her eyes were twin suns. Her voice echoed not from her mouth but from the air itself. "Jon Snow," she whispered, "you were my bridge, my flame reborn. Now step aside or be extinguished." Jon raised Longclaw. "You don't get to rewrite the world," Melisandre laughed. "I already have." She vanished in a blink of light. Back in Winterfell, the snow turned to red ash. The dead in the crypts rose, not wights, but burning revenants, fueled by ancient fire magic. They screamed names that hadn't been heard in centuries. Arya fought. Them. Sansa nearly died in her chambers. Bran collapsed in the godswood, eyes white, blood streaming from his nose. Jon returned too late. Winterfell burned, not from dragons, but from within. The roots, the walls, the bones, all ignited as if the entire castle had become a pyre. The north fell, and Melisandre never once stepped foot inside. She didn't need to. She had set the soul of Winterfell aflame, and the flames were hungry. Winterfell had stood for thousands of years, stone carved by the hands of the first men, roots older than kings, but it had never faced an enemy like this. The north was quiet after the war, too quiet. The snow never melted. The sky held a strange red tint, as if dawn had frozen mid-scream. Ravens flew in circles, confused. Direwolves refused to howl. Something had shifted. Something had cracked. Bran Stark, now the three-eyed raven, sat beneath the weirwood tree. His visions, once clear as flowing water, had turned into firestorms. The branches around him wept sap like blood. Every time he closed his eyes he saw her, Melisandre, walking through ancient ruins, lighting flames in places where no fire should burn. Her face, older, cracked, glowing from within, no longer a servant of flame, now something flame-born. Bran called a council, Sansa, Arya, Jon, but they didn't understand. How could they? Jon was still wrestling with Daenerys. Sansa distrusted every shadow. Arya was restless, always watching the road behind her more than the one ahead. Bran tried to explain that the war wasn't over, that the true enemy hadn't been the Night King, but the one who had let him fall, and she was still alive. Sansa narrowed her eyes. "You mean the Red Woman? She vanished after the battle." Bran didn't blink. "She's not gone. She's become something else, and Winterfell is the next gate." That night the air turned to ash. A low hum began to vibrate through the stones of Winterfell. The crypts echoed with soft whispers, as if the dead were remembering something. The old gods turned their faces away, and in the eastern skies, over the shivering sea, a red star streaked across the heavens. Not a comet. A warning. Melisandre had returned, but she didn't walk through the gates. She appeared in dreams. To soldiers, to servants, to Bran, whispers of temptation, visions of burning glory, flashes of an eternal kingdom bathed in firelight. And one by one, people began to disappear. Bran's mind cracked open one night as he entered the weirwood. Network. The roots beneath Winterfell had once been sacred, pure connections to the past. Now they burned. Literally. He saw Melisandre standing in the heart of Valyria, arms outstretched, fire pouring through her like veins of molten gold. She was no longer alone. Figures stood behind her, priests of ash, eyeless, chanting. The nameless flame had found form, and it was using her to rewrite history itself. Jon Snow tried to confront her. He rode south, alone, to the edge of the Stormlands, where firestorms had begun swallowing villages. He found her, or something that wore her skin. She stood barefoot in a circle of scorched earth. Her eyes were twin suns. Her voice echoed not from her mouth but from the air itself. "Jon Snow," she whispered, "you were my bridge, my flame reborn. Now step aside, or be extinguished." Jon raised Longclaw. "You don't get to rewrite the world." Melisandre laughed. "I already have." She vanished in a blink of light. Back in Winterfell, the snow turned to red ash. The dead in the crypts rose, not wights, but burning revenants, fueled by ancient fire magic. They screamed names that hadn't been heard in centuries. Arya fought them. Sansa nearly died in her chambers. Bran collapsed in the Godswood, eyes white, blood streaming from his nose. Jon returned too late. Winterfell burned, not from dragons, but from within. The roots, the walls, the bones, all ignited as if the entire castle had become a pyre. The north fell, and Melisandre never once stepped foot inside. She didn't need to. She had set the soul of Winterfell aflame, and the flames were hungry. The ashes of Winterfell still clung to Jon Snow's cloak. He didn't speak for days. Not to Arya, not to Bran, who now lay in a trance, barely breathing. Not even to Sansa, whose hands were burned black from pulling children out. Of the flames, the north had fallen. But worse, the flame had spread. South of the Neck, fires erupted in forests with no spark. Lakes began to steam under red moons. Stone crumbled in towns untouched by war, and rumors swirled from far-off lands that Valyria had awakened. But Jon didn't care about rumors. He had only one mission left: stop Melisandre. In Dragonstone, Daenerys sat in silence. She had watched Winterfell burn in her dreams. She had heard Melisandre's voice again, whispering promises through the stone walls. "You have felt it, haven't you, Daenerys? The fire is not your enemy, it is your destiny." Dany was tired, so tired. She had tried to save the world, and now the world was crumbling beneath her, but the flame within her pulsed stronger each day. Every time she touched Drogon, he growled, as if sensing something in her that even she didn't understand. Then, one night, she lit a candle, and, it melted into blood. Jon arrived days later, only to find the Dragonstone throne room empty. Daenerys was gone. Only Tyrion remained, half drunk, trembling. "She left," he said. Didn't say where, didn't say why. Only that she had to. Finish what they all started. Jon's heart sank. He knew where she was going. King's Landing. The capital had become a city of prayer and panic. People gathered at the Great Sept, begging for light to return to the skies, for the red hue to vanish, for the birds to stop flying in circles like humans. And then, as dusk fell, Melisandre walked through the gates. No army, no dragons, no blood, just her. And behind her, Daenerys. Their eyes were mirrors. Their steps perfectly aligned. The people of the city, terrified yet spellbound, parted for them like waves. Tyrion, riding hard behind Jon, saw it from afar. Gods, she's not just manipulating Daenerys, she's becoming her. Jon arrived. In the capital as the flames began to rise. This time it wasn't Drogon. The Red Keep itself ignited from inside, veins of molten stone crawling up the walls, statues crying tears of fire. It was like the soul of the city was rejecting its history. Melisandre stood on the steps of the Great Sept, arms outstretched. Her hair had turned white, crackling with sparks. Her voice echoed through the alleys. "From fire you were born. From fire you will rise again. Let the false thrones burn." And behind her, Daenerys raised her hands, not to command dragons, but to call the fire directly. John shouted her name, but she didn't look. He ran through the burning streets, fighting back flames and falling stone. Arya was already there, blades drawn, circling Melisandre like a shadow. But she didn't strike. She couldn't. Melisandre turned to her slowly. "You have tasted death. You know what waits. Would you not rather live forever in the flame?" Arya hesitated, just 1 second, and that was enough for Melisandre to vanish again, a living ember carried by the wind. Daenerys collapsed, her power drained, her mind spinning. The voice was gone. She looked up at Jon through smoke and tears. I didn't mean to. I thought I was saving them." Jon knelt beside her, trembling. And then the ground cracked beneath them. From the bowels of the Red Keep, the nameless flame awakened fully. The skies turned black, the sun bled, and Melisandre, now more fire than flesh, appeared one final time, not as a woman, not as a priestess, but as a god. The sky over Westeros had split, not with thunder but with flame. Clouds twisted into rings of ash, the stars vanished behind a burning veil, and at the heart of King's Landing, a second sun rose, blinding, pulsing, alive. Not a weapon, not a dragon, but Melisandre. She hovered, above the crumbling Red Keep like a spirit unbound. Her robes burned away, her flesh, translucent and golden red, shimmered with molten light. Her hair was smoke, her eyes twin coals of eternity. The gods of old had fled. The faith of the Seven had gone silent. Even the weirwoods had withered, because a new god had risen, not born of prophecy, but built from it. "Behold me," her voice rang out, carried across Westeros by the wind itself. "I was your shadow, now I am your flame. For centuries you knelt before thrones, before old gods, before broken kings, but I offer purity." The people below knelt, not from faith, from fear. Bran woke from his trance in the north. His voice cracked like ice. "She's no longer a servant, she's the source. She stole power from the fire, and now she is the fire." Arya, standing among the rubble of the capital, looked to the horizon. There has to be a way to kill her. Jon held Daenerys, still recovering, her lips blistered from flame. No. She was once human. That means she can bleed. But Tyrion shook his head. "She's not playing by rules anymore. This is a new game, and we're already losing." Across the sea in Volantis, the Red Temple exploded. The flames didn't destroy the building, they rose through it. Hundreds of priests screamed in unison, caught in a wave of power. Some burned, others ascended, transformed into flame-bound. Loyal to Melisandre and marked with glowing runes, they were her messengers now, her angels of ash, and they marched. Meanwhile, in the ruins of Valyria, something vast began to rise, a shadow made of embers. A dragon without a body, born from magic and fire. It didn't fly. It floated, its wings made of smoke, its roar like 100 crackling pyres. This was no creature. It was the nameless flame's true form, rising through Melisandre's will, and it was heading toward Westeros. In desperation, Jon and Arya turned to Bran. He reached into the roots of the broken world. Into time, into memory. He saw Melisandre as a child, a slave in Ashai, raised in fire temples, experimented on by flame-seers. He saw her first vision, a world reborn in fire, her god whispering in her sleep. He saw her choice, not to serve, Urla, but to break from it, to become the bringer of unmaking. Bran found one last thread of power, a memory buried in the blood of first men, a forgotten magic, dangerous and unstable, capable of binding a god, but it required death. A sacrifice, not of innocence, of lineage. Jon stepped forward. "I am the blood of the dragon, I carry ice and fire. If this is what ends it, then I'll pay the price." Arya placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not alone. Together, the last." Of the Starks rode through the burning kingdoms. They weren't heroes anymore, just children of a world on fire chasing one last hope. Melisandre saw them coming, and she smiled. "You will kneel or you will burn." Jon raised Longclaw. Arya unsheathed needle. Bran, eyes white, summoned the last winds of the old world. The ground shook, the air split, and fire met blood. The battlefield was not a place, it was the air, the sky, and the burning bones of the old world. Melisandre stood atop the ruins of King's Landing, flames dancing at her feet, her body no longer flesh, but flickering power and rage. Above her the nameless flame loomed, stretching like a storm across the heavens, a fire dragon without a heart, without a soul, without end. The world watched, in dawn, in the Vale, beyond the narrow sea. Everyone, from lords to beggars, felt the pull of something ancient, something final, and in that moment, all light turned red. Jon Snow, Arya Stark, and Bran, the last hope of a broken world, arrived at the center of it all, the steps of the Great Sept, where it had all begun. Jon stepped forward first. His sword, Longclaw, glowed faintly, not with heat, but with resolve. He was no longer a king, no longer a bastard. He was a sword with a soul. Arya flanked him, silent and swift. The scars on her face were fresh, her blade soaked in the blood of gods and monsters. She wasn't a girl anymore. She was death in motion. And Bran sat still beneath the weirwood tree they'd planted in the ashes. His mind was not in his body anymore. He had fused with the land itself. He was the memory of the world. Melisandre looked down at them, not with hatred, but with sorrow. "You were always too soft," she said. "Too bound by honor, by mercy. That's why your world crumbled. That's why it's mine now." Jon's voice was steady. "You were supposed to be a guide, a servant." "I was," she replied, "but the gods failed, the people failed. I gave them fire. I gave them purpose, and they spat on it. So I became the only thing they understand, power." Above, the sky tore open as the nameless flame began to descend. Its maw gaped, ready to consume not just the city, but the very timeline of history. All pasts, all futures twisted and rewritten into a single story, hers. But Bran wasn't done. With every flicker of his thoughts, the roots of the world responded. He reached into the heart of the weirwood network, what little remained of it. He called to the children of the forest, to the last whispers of green magic, to the soul of Westeros itself, and he found something old, something buried, a memory of a ritual used once, long ago, to seal away another god. It demanded a bloodline, bound in both fire and ice, a soul touched by death, a will pure enough to die, and not return. Jon met Bran's eyes across the smoke. "I understand." Bran only nodded. He had seen it coming since the beginning. Jon kissed Arya's forehead. "Don't follow me this time." She didn't argue. She just pressed her blade into his palm. "Make it count." Jon Snow walked into the flame. Every step closer to Melisandre peeled away part of his skin, part of his soul. But he kept going. And when he reached her, she looked into his eyes. She saw Rhaegar. She saw Lyanna. She saw Ned. She saw every piece of him. And for a brief moment, the god inside her flinched. That was all he needed. Jon plunged the dagger into his own chest. Not into her, into himself, and whispered, "Let this be the last light." Bran screamed. The wind roared, and time itself shattered. The nameless flame froze. Its fire, meant to consume the world, turned inward, devouring itself. Jon's sacrifice had become a tether, a seal. The ice in his blood, the fire in his heart, the death on his hand, they bound the god. And with one final scream, Melisandre erupted in light. Not an explosion, a release of power, of pain, of 1,000 lives she had taken, set free in the air like stardust. The flame vanished, the sky cleared, the world exhaled. Where Melisandre stood, there was only ash. Where Jon fell, there was only silence. Arya rushed to his side. But Bran already knew he was gone, this time for good. The years passed. Arya sailed west beyond the known world. Sansa rebuilt the north stone by stone. Bran never left the tree. He became the last echo of magic in a world learning to heal, and in the center of what was once King's Landing, they built no new throne, no new capital, only a garden, where flowers bloomed in strange colors and fireflies danced like embers. The flame had ended, not with conquest, not with glory, but with one man's choice to let the fire die, so that others could live.